Welcome to Screening Room. I'm Robert Gardner. On this final program, I feel very fortunate because I'm surrounded by very dear friends. On my extreme left is William Alfred, who is a dramatist, having written The Agamemnon, or at least an adaptation of The Agamemnon, and Hogan's Goat. He's also a poet. He's a teacher of English, and he is some kind of a legend at Harvard as a professor of Anglo-Saxon and English. Next to him is Octavio Paz, who's from Mexico. He is also a poet and an essayist, having done such famous and remarkable books as The Labyrinth of Solitude. The other, Mexico, and a number of books of poetry, plays, and essays of all kinds. Most recently, Alternating Current, which has just come out. He's an anthropologist. He was a diplomat at one time. And he's a kind of an authority on surrealism. I'm not sure what this has to do with this program, but maybe something. The film we're going to see is called Dead Birds. I began it about 10 years ago in New Guinea, and it was completed in 1964. It's 83 minutes long. We're going to try to show it without any interruptions, or any significant interruptions. The film, I suppose, can be said to be about the consequences of mortality, or at least about the consequences of men knowing that they must die. Let's go and see the film now. I'll come back with Octavio Paz and Bill Alfred, and we'll talk about it later. In the address which you just gave at BU, Octavio, you drew upon the question of mortality in a way that I was very fascinated in, saying that I think that in a sense that we're lucky to not live forever, that we must face death in order to live. What did you mean? And
well,
what does it mean here? Perhaps they're doing the same thing.
In this case, they know that they are mortal. You said it very well at the end of the film. The difference between animals and us is that we know that we are mortal, but that could be only a rather intellectual knowledge. The important thing is that with this knowledge we make symbols, metaphors, and with these metaphors we make civilizations. I think Lévi-Strauss has said something rather important when he talked about the raw and the cook. He was talking about the difference.
About the what?
Talking about the raw.
The raw and the cooked.
And the cooked.
Oh, the raw and the cooked.
Yeah. Well, he was talking about the difference between nature and culture. But the line is the knowledge of death. And that culture starts with the knowledge of death.
Do you think that our culture doesn't handle this very well? Do you think that we know the difference between the raw and the cooked, or between... have we confronted the fact of our mortality properly in, let's say, modern life? I'm not sure. We hide death everywhere.
Yes, and we make, over the last 20 years, there's been a cult of anger which really glorifies
youth,
I think, a thing that belongs to all humanity, which is a puzzling anger at our own mortality. In this society, it manifests itself in warfare, but in our society we have this notion that if you could really let the anger go, that you would be able to purify the society. So in a sense, the ideas that are in modern societies now are very like that.
Times I used to feel when I saw the picture, even when I was making it, that perhaps it was a parable that would teach us something about how to cope with violence within us, or with the problem of death. Certainly the theme has to do with that somehow, but there are vast differences between our way of handling our violence and their way of handling it.
Oh yes, there are vast differences, but I do think that that we have a tendency, because of primitivism since the 18th century, to celebrate certain primitive things, which, looking at this film, can give you pause.
Well, the anthropology is a very peculiar science, because in the moment that we can see film as your film, with all the modern technique applied to the study of a society, of a closed society, this society is disappearing. Even the fact that you are using the cinema as a way to know them, in this moment they are disappearing. It's very strange, as the object of anthropology is corroded by anthropology itself.
Yes.
Well, I think we have to stop our discussion of anthropology at this point. We'll be back in just a moment. Well, we're at the end of the final program of this series. I want to thank you both very, very much for coming. I will not be back next week with another program, but perhaps another series someday.